Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. It's a really exciting thing to be launching online with the 4 new Poets Prize winning pamphlets from, well, they won in 2022 and are published in 2023, so kind of span both years. I'm Suzannah Evans, so I work for the Poetry Business, and I've been working with these poets since their win on putting the pamphlets together and getting them ready for publication. So I know all these poets quite well, these poems quite well, and I feel like you're in for a treat. You're going to hear some extraordinary readings this evening. So the evening's going to run like this. We're going to have a reading from each of the 4 poets, and then we're going to have a short question and answer session at the end. So if, while the poets are reading, you're really intrigued by a particular poem, or you wonder how they wrote that, or what inspired a certain thing, please do make your questions known. You can pop them into the chat box, the YouTube chat box down the side, and they will be magically transported to my mind, and then I will ask them of the poets at the end of their readings. And yeah, so just keep doing that whenever you think of them as we go along, but I'm sure I'll give you a little bit of a nudge later. The other thing is, you can buy all these pamphlets if you're enjoying what you hear. They're all available at the Poetry Business website, which is www.poetrybusiness.co.uk. We have a bit of a code for like a sort of discount code for free postage for these pamphlets as well. So I'm sure I will just telepathically transmit that to the YouTube chat box as well right now. But the code is NPP22 postage, all in capitals. So you can use that. So that's good. Okay, I'm going to introduce our first poet. We've been on some outings already with these pamphlets. Our first reading was at Sheaf Poetry Festival in Sheffield, and we've since been to Oxford Poetry Library as well. So I feel like we're kind of a well-oiled machine in some ways, although we do keep switching up the reading order because you need to make life interesting, don't you? Our first poet of the evening is Beth Davies, who is from Sheffield, where I am, where the Poetry Business is based as well. And Beth's pamphlet is The Pretence of Understanding. The Pretence of Understanding explores loss, not just of loved ones, but of youth and adolescence. In these poems, where time can stand still or run backwards, the reader finds himself caught in longing moments of looking back at childhood. They remind us to run in the snow while we get the chance. And Beth Davies is an emerging poet based in Sheffield. Her poetry has been published in Poetry Wales, Atrium, Rust and Moth, and Pulp Poets Press, and in various anthologies as well. Candlestick Press's 10 Poems About Flowers and Valley Press's Verse Matters. She won 2nd place in the highly specific 2021 Dead Cat Poetry Prize, and in the 2022 Magdalena Young Poets Prize. Beth is a member of the Hive Poetry Collective, a graduate of the Writing Squad and Durham University Slam Team and Sheffield Young Writers. Welcome with your virtual applause. Please welcome Beth Davies.
Thanks for that introduction, Suzannah. I feel like having been said that we're a well-oiled machine, it puts quite a lot of pressure on me to go first for the first time. But oh well, I don't know if I'm well-oiled. So I thought I'd kind of leap in with the first poem from the book, and I think part of the reason why this is the first poem is because it's a note that I kind of wanted to perhaps move away from throughout the book. So it's because it is a bit of a morbid one. If you're squeamish, maybe mute this one, because it's about when I dissected a rat in my AS level biology. And to be honest, I think this poem is like the most valuable thing I got out of AS biology, because I didn't go down a sciencey route. So thank you, AS biology, for that. And it's just called Rat Dissection. She is crucified against cardboard, stomach cruelly exposed. I'm surprised how easy it is to cut through skin. I try not to think about my own pale flesh. The intricate mess glistens beneath. Intestine, lungs, liver, kidney, spleen, not neatly arranged like textbook diagrams. The stench fills me, threatens to empty me out. Is this how we all eventually smell? I am lucky not to know the answer. Opened insides reveal harsh simplicity. The guts are only a tangle of tubes, the brain a lump of cells, the heart a bag of muscle. I cannot find the signs of how she moved, how she thought, how she felt. In the end, there is only meat. So next I'm going to read the one that comes immediately after that in the book, because I think these kind of play off each other in a sort of interesting way. At least I find it interesting. I didn't write them to go together, but when I put them together, I was like, what does that say? And this one is kind of about my family's relationship with religion. And it's called Familial Scriptures. In my house, we are a family of atheists with biblical names. My father and brother are both faithless gospels. My name, Bethany, is the town of Lazarus, a place of miracles where things did not stay dead. My mother hasn't sat through a service in years, yet can't walk past the Catholic Church without entering. She doesn't believe in God, but her hands still do. I watch as she crosses herself at the altar, bowed head, fingertips flying to the 4 points her father taught her. He treasured his faith like a rusted heirloom. My grandma, who used to say it was all nonsense, finds hymns easier than speech now. I don't know what the sacred is, but I hear it in her trembling voice. Having said that, I was moving away from the kind of morbid tone of the first one. There are various other dead animal poems in the book, but perhaps with slightly different tones. And one of them is the one that the title of the book comes from. And I think I have fixed on the Pretence of Understanding as a title because I kind of like the idea that in poetry and in life, we're kind of trying to find ways to pretend that we know what's going on, but also to kind of come to terms with the things that we don't understand or can't quite grasp. I think poetry is often a way of talking about the things that you can't grasp in that simple way and that you're otherwise pretending to understand. And this is just called Cleaning the Pool. Each day we fished 6- and 8-legged things from the water, the net teeming with bugs that had met their chlorinated end. Despite our parents' disapproval, we tipped the bodies into a glass jar and kept it by the poolside, a morbid greenhouse baking in the Italian sun. We did not try to identify species. We had no need for that pretense of understanding. Our fascination was in the unsorted tangle of shell and wing and abdomen, in which it was hard to tell where one ended and the next began. One kid speculated how the creatures would look as they dried out. He asked the adults to place their bet on which parts would decay and what would be left behind. Another declared our aim to fill the jar to the top. He kept track of the rising line with the same enthusiasm he showed over his Match Attacks album. A third held that vessel with reverence, always made sure we placed it somewhere safe. When I gazed into the jar like it was a crystal ball, I could almost hear legs scuttling, wings fluttering, the whisper of what they'd once been. At the end of the week, our parents made us throw away the contents of the jar. I don't remember if we grieved. And because I like to do a tonal shift, this next one is about the song Reach by S Club 7, which is obviously a banger. But when I hear it, it makes me think of being a child and singing this at my Year 2 Leavers Assembly, because it was like a tradition in my school. And so it kind of makes me think of my younger self in incongruous places. And that's where this poem came from. Visitation from Past Self. Reach by S Club 7 has just come on, and I'm about to take a gulp of vodka coke when I notice her on the edge of my vision. My 8-year-old self, a few steps away, somehow unjostled by the crowd. She's watching me, and I stop dancing, self-conscious in a way I don't ever remember her being. I abandoned my drink somewhere and crouched to her level. I sang this at my Year 2 Leavers Assembly, she yelled. Yes, I remember, I shout back. I nearly say I think of her whenever I hear this song, but I don't want to seem obsessed with her. She's too young to be here, so I take her hand to guide her outside. Instead, she ends up leading, pulling me through the crowd. The strobe lights blink her out of existence and back in. Her hand is small and sweaty. I grip tightly, for fear she'll disappear. Out on the street, I've no cover for not knowing what to say to her. I never got the hang of talking to children, nor to myself. She asks, "What's it like to be old?" I protest that I'm only 25. "But you are a grown-up," she declares, like she's won an argument. I shrug, unsure how to respond to this appraisal. She inspects me again, the boldness of her gaze absurd on her young face. "Were you really this confident?" I ask. "I was sometimes," she says. "Anyway, you imagine me like this." Inside, Reach for the Stars is fading out. We stand together, listening. As she looks up at me, the lyrics are a question in her eyes, and I don't know the answer. I'll finish my little set now with another one that is sort of weird about time. That's a kind of another thing that I was sort of playing with in the pamphlet. Yeah, I'll just go into it actually. This is called Final Visit. We used to read Tennyson and Wordsworth together. Now we stick to picture books. Today it's Harry McClary. You like the rhymes and the drawings of dogs. I start reading to you, but halfway through the book, you take over unexpectedly, your voice carried along by the tide of words, your eyesight sharp even without your glasses. When we reach the end, you begin turning the pages back again. I can't tell if you've forgotten the usual direction or if you just don't want the story to be over. You read the whole book in reverse. Animals retreating through hedges, moonwalking down the street, leaping backwards over fences, none of them looking in the direction they are going. For you, it's no more disjointed than the other way round. You don't remember a page once it's no longer in front of you. I wonder if we'll stay forever in this perpetual present, reading back to front, then front to back, over and over, trying to make the story return to itself. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing everyone else's this evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Beth. Yeah, I really recommend that pamphlet, The Pretense of Understanding. Of course I recommended it. I edited it, but you know, I am very biased. But yeah, there's such a lot of time travel and back and forth and kind of slightly weird magic in those poems. Our next poet of the evening is Serena Alagappan, whose poetry pamphlet is Sensitive to Temperature. It's a pamphlet that seeks out the precariousness and sensitivities of language, as well as the fragilities of the world that it represents. These are eco-poems that experience time on a human and non-human scale, from the movements of rock to the sources of rivers. Serena received her AB in Comparative Literature and Creative Writing from Princeton University. She then studied social anthropology and literature at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar and has edited poetry for the 30th Annual Mays Anthology and the Oxford Review of Books. Her poems have appeared in the London Magazine, the American Journal of Poetry, the Colorado Review, and elsewhere, and that's the pamphlet. And give a very warm welcome that we can't hear to Serena.
Thank you so much, Suzannah, and thank you to Beth and Chloe and Tom. It's been such an honor sharing these moments at our various events, as Suzannah mentioned, over the last couple of months and reading with you. And yeah, I'm really excited to have the official Poetry Business launch today virtually. And so the pamphlet is called Sensitive to Temperature, and I was interested in kind of exploring the interpersonal realm as a point of entry for these larger conversations about environmental degradation and the climate crisis. So kind of thinking about what contamination and fragility and disasters even look like between people and in our internal environments as well. So the first poem of the pamphlet is the one I'll start with, and it's called Slip Face. Gazing up at a long, shallow angle of loose sand recalls the typical dread. If I reach out, will you make time for me? The steep lee size of those Aeolian landforms involves erosion. What is left besides deflation, desert, and pavement? There exist geological agents, such as rivers, glaciers, and waves, water really, who offer sediment. Among these transformations comes, has the moment passed? Sun radiates off the slip face, and longing in its breath, I shake my head toward the dune. No, I say, the moment's never passed with you. And for the second poem that I'm going to read today, it's actually what inspired the sort of lettering on the front of the pamphlet behind the lettering, the backdrop image of the Northern Lights. And it's called Aurora. Rory would bleed, so pretty like morning, but in a season where light leaks rare, where light is green, marking a birth or all that's pure. Rory smiles because she's fragile, but icy too. These days, it's hard to remember how good a gash in the sky feels, thawed across one's view, or losing track of whose fingers belong to whom. Even more difficult to recall what was beautiful without witness. I think ignorance is both a blessing and a curse. Everything became slippery, confusing after the first. And the next poem I'm going to read is called Leisureland. And there was a sequence of poems within the pamphlet that are sort of about piers and arcades and sort of engaging with this idea of liminal spaces that aren't quite representative of the natural world, but they're kind of close to it, but they're still an imposition of human construction and the idea of the sort of disenchantment one can feel upon arriving there. So, Leisureland. No longer played, the game is called Cosmic Crane. It's an abandoned arcade, and this booth sports a painted rocket tearing toward your camera. Yoda, Spider-Man, and Peter Rabbit droop, hung on the gate in front of a mirror. Settled in the sea of plastic hollow balls lies a unicorn, stuffed cadaver, pupils bulging on its side like a valley sleeper with bullet wounds. Magic horse, relaxed and haunting. Big prizes, repeat twice in block letters. Fists thumping glass, foggy from small hot mouths, vending machine like Christmas morning. And on the right, a desperate whack-a-mole, every animal skull a future, rising like a fig, evading its own shadow, how a groundhog's cloudy ceiling cries spring. And this next poem I'm going to read is called After the Mushroom at the End of the World. And this is actually the poem that kind of started me on the whole momentum for working toward a pamphlet. And it was inspired by Anna Tsing's book, The Mushroom at the End of the World. And I was just very inspired by the metaphor that Anna Tsing develops in that book. And the idea, there was specifically a description of the matsutake mushroom as, harnessing radiation from nuclear disaster, the way some plants photosynthesize light. And I just thought that that was an incredible metaphor for how we can try to excavate hope from sites of human destruction and decay, but also how kind of eerie and strange it is to do that, and the simultaneous resilience of the natural world. So this one is inspired by that book. These remedial gestures, how a spinning bulk of garbage in the sea becomes a holy vortex for a plastic bag's vagrancy. How landfill picking transforms for garden artists, pluck, prune, and glean like you're foraging treasure on behalf of trash. How after nuclear disaster, mushrooms grow on reactor walls, harnessing radiation like purple alliums photosynthesize light. Happy globes bursting, these flowers can nurture budding stars in climates on the drier side. Drought tolerant, they'll keep alive. I read once that there's a kind of love that doesn't extend itself both ways between two people equally because it doesn't have to. When air explodes hot and buoyant, it bubbles and expands, waltzes with open legs and a rising skirt, condensing debris, sucking energy from decay. What's left at the end of the world besides lichen, missile clouds blocking the sun, and a harvest for two that can only be tilled by one. And the next poem that I'm going to read is called Holy. Holy those colors in rain after drought, a puddled vow, iris damp and aching. Holy the indigo aura that casts doubt on a landscape's verity. Fog or foam, snow caps or sea. Holy the difference between solid and liquid, this thin, a cloud thrums, only temporarily pregnant. Holy how time morphs between shores, how when suspended in ice, petals burn to touch. Holy their will to wither, unholy their right to lie, holy to be mummified. Holy atmosphere of glass shattered by the unjaded, holy temple on the beach, which the tsunami passed. Holy Hanuman, monkey-headed deity, turning winds in his hands. Holy statue draped in marigolds, tearing open its chest. Holy stars shrill in the sky. Holy the potato hauled out of the soil. Holy the hair-thin seed of the potato plant. Holy the volcano, and the one spared from the volcano, and the volcano's fertile sand. And inspired by Beth's tone shift, this is my singular attempt at a satirical poem, and it's called Shop Local. The stone pine is local, but a blueberry plant sprouts rampant. The wife takes to it with shears. She doesn't mind the bees. Her smash of avocado isn't local, but it's heaping with feta in a square city with prime dimensions. She drinks jitterless CBD-infused cold brew, bred on campus by two buddies in a frat house. Before the tech bubble, she needed maps. Her dot didn't move, only guidebook pages and sweaty hands. In this nuptial story, the camera zooms in on the curtain, its shadow, two empty bottles of flat oaky vino, then the woman, who identifies as married, flinching, asking to be alone, a single tear on a tightrope. And I will just read two more poems. This one is called Even Now Assembling. Even now, this dreamscape is assembling, even as the screws twist left. The only thing we built together is unfinished. The dresser's cardboard spine pinned, but drawers on the floor, severed panels I step over in the dark. Noting each detail, I watched you count each nail. Because I'm impatient, I'll leave it this way, gaping, with sunrise seeping through my window shades. I want to wake with a stutter or a slap. I no longer believe in things coming ready-made. I expect to need a hammer. When I've slept enough, I'll pluck a costume off its hanger. And when I spin in that pretty dress, it'll be like screws are in my feet. And this final poem is called Sensitive to Temperature. And yes, obviously that's the same, that's what gave the pamphlet the title. So yes. Frost at high altitudes in the Atacama Desert reaps snow stuck so tight flakes look like bones or like pilgrims stooped in worship when their chins grind their sternums and their eyes humor sporadic peaks skyward. Penitents get their name in the dry Andes from the converts who, inconsolable, buckle from their feet. The jagged promise made by grouting glacial blades might likewise move you to your knees. Spires under a night sky, glinting like the stars that stake their claim in darkness, still won't melt when licked by sun if they're high enough. Elderly icicles reversed in their rising also stand 50 feet tall on a satellite of Jupiter. Those frigid mountain veins are just a few 100 million miles away. They live close to, in me and you, sensitive to temperature, frozen in numb rupture. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Serena. Those landscapes that kind of zoom in and zoom out, and the macro of the world and the micro of human interactions, and just how the ways in which we sort of butt up against the natural world, I just think are so unusual. They're so unusual, the way the poems deal with all these things. So this is sensitive temperature, which is fantastic. Our next poet of the evening is Chloe Elliott. Chloe's pamphlet is Encyclopaedia, which is I always forget how to say this word, and Chloe has told me more than once, abecedarian pamphlet. So it is like an encyclopedia. It follows the alphabet. It's playful and visceral, exploring boundaries of identity and the search for meaning in poems that delight with richly tactile language. Chloe is also an artist, and you can sort of feel that, I think, in some of these poems. They pay attention to the texture of things a lot. These poems are formally varied and unflinching in their physicality. Chloe is a poet based in York. She is the gold winner of the 2020 Creative Future Writers Award. Her writing has been published in Poetry Birmingham, Bath Mag, Strix, The North, Bedtime Stories for the End of the World, and Magma, amongst others. And she is currently creative apprentice for modern poetry and translation, and works for Aesthetica. Welcome to Chloe.
Hello. This is so strange. It's so strange to be reading on a digital platform. We've had so many really, really lovely in-person audiences for Poetry Business in Oxford and Sheffield. So it's so weird just to have a screen of pure black, but this is a virtual hello to anyone who's tapping in and joining. Yes, this is it. This is her. This is a abecedarian pamphlet, and it starts with the first poem, which is Au Pair, and ends with the final poem, which is Water. I don't do the full A to Z scheme of things because it would be a little bit too subscriptive to do that, and it would also be a kind of awkward rendering of the X's and Z poems, and I don't have a xylophone poem in me whatsoever. So I'll start with Au Pair. This poem is about an au pair experience I had. So I au paired in Italy for a period of 3 months, and I had a really awful time, actually. I was living with a family who were vegan and celiac, which is not why I had an awful time. The reason I had an awful time is because the boy that I was au pairing, whose name I've changed in the poem, was just a little shit. And there's no way he's watching this Zoom, but if he is, he needs to know. No, I've changed his name in the poem in the fear that one day he will hold the pamphlet and reflect upon the slander lent against him. But for now, I will share it with our little private circle of poets and writers. And then the kid makes a joke about a pointy hat and says, your trousers would fit in a paddy field. And then he says, God won't deliver you quick into kindness, and you don't hold anything extraneous or even qualify with the parts that count, the parts that will get you through the golden gates. and past the undulating men who resemble Peter Sarsgaard. And then his dad is looking at you in a funny kind of way at dinner, touching your feet. I say, fuck you, Benedetto. I'll stick gluten into your polenta that'll show you my good heart and my teeth that break at this time of month. Anyway, he was only 8, so I didn't do any of that and just asked for it with milk instead. The second poem I'm going to read is also a poem that was written when I was living in Italy at the time. And I was reading a lot of Rilke and actually found a copy of his letters to a young poet in the Tuscany library that I was using, which was mad because there were only about 7 books in English, but this was there. And on one of the pages was one of the letters he had that was based in Viareggio, which was about 5 minutes from the town that I was au pairing in. So it was this scary coincidence of things colliding. And this is a kind of writing back to that. Body. Hello again, old friend. Hello, furuncle, old tired spaceship that sometimes struggles to make it in the morning, struggles to wake. Let me hold your hand. What will come away if not the beeswax and thread, the yarn for the French folds and gaps in the bind, the secret pockets that carry chopped thumbs, cherry tomatoes and train tickets. Let's try rolling you out until you resemble a Helen Frankenthaler. Be a girl who is all for experiments. Reach into yourself and find a pace that is strict and fractious, the sting of sunburn and consistency of sambal belacan. Pull that stuff out. Live your new dream life as a puddle of goo, a damp sheet of dough, unsuitable for lasagna, but perfect for heavy clay and rose growing. I'm saying, squeeze yourself between the stones of an aluminium printing press and lie back. Pretend you're on a beach in Viareggio. The soft whir of the waves as Rilke strokes the moles on your back. The next poem I'm going to do is I'm going to do my gay club poem because I think there may be some Durham people watching. So I went to Durham Uni and went to one club in Durham Uni that was called Osborne's. And there was one gay night in the Hall of Durham on a Monday held by Osborne's. And it was a feral place because there was the one club and the one night, and the queues used to basically croon all the way down Elbit Bridge with like 50 people starting from 7 p.m. And in the summer, this began to get more and more awkward, obviously, because the sun was still out. So it was this really absurd, like, string of people waiting to get inside this 20 capacity club. I remember queuing up and like getting pushed down the stairs or like basically trying to get intimidated out the line. But me and my friends always managed to make it in the club in the end. And this poem is, well, it started off as a question and answer poem. And it's about my friend Adrian, who may or may not be watching, who was one of the feral members of the Osborne's Club and went round biting everyone in a very loving way, but still in a very dangerous, slightly crazed demeanor. But I read this with a whole lot of love for both Osborne's and Adrian. Gay Club. Adrian glowed that evening, had glowworms underneath his cheeks. When he held them up to the lamplight, he saw them wriggle, saw them like the inside of a marble, like hot glass being blown, saw the punty inoculate the night, saw my cells dancing. He never wanted to wear matching socks. He thought thumbs should never exist. He imagined every body as a boulder and asked them to move really kindly. You don't understand how long we had to stand in that queue for. How when we left, they were still in line, a purple garland that crooned into the weir. He'll turn his lava lamp off this time. We'll make our own jazz bar. It will be jazz every day, not just on Mondays, and no one will push you down the stairs. There will be enough space for all the jazz enthusiasts. In fact, they'll get melon on arrival. We'll make the whole thing out of whalebone and Chinese karaoke, and we'll serve espresso martinis in Petri glasses sealed with algal bloom. And how Mina Loy will laugh, how she'll still life us with our pink coughs and our white rabbit hearts. And I'll do a few more. I'm going to do an excerpt from a longer piece in the pamphlet. So this is a sequence called Red is the Body Electric that sits at the middle of the pamphlet, and is a kind of, I always think of it as the ribcage of the book because it strings together topics to do with womanhood and culture and belonging and being a mixed race person in the north of England, and feeling so far flung from home in so many different ways. And I wrote this poem on Valentine's Day. So it was originally called Valentine's Day, but was kind of tied up with a lot of feelings of lack because it, well, one, it was Valentine's Day, and two, it was a few weeks after Chinese New Year, and I wasn't home, and I hadn't been home for a very long time. I think it would have been one of the lockdowns, and was desperately kind of texting my mum, wishing that I could grab some kind of Malaysian food, and she was sending me like job offers, classic. So this is the final stanza from that poem. 4. Valentine's Day lands in the same month of sad, falling 2 weeks after Chinese New Year. The Ang Pao Reds carried forward 2 oceans away. I am not at home for either holiday, and neither is Mum. I say Gong Si Fa Choi, though search it beforehand to double check the spelling. I ask her if she's doing anything and she doesn't reply, though texts a photo of a club card voucher and a Google internship. You don't need a degree to work at Google. They train you and you can work from home. I go to Chinatown and Newcastle, and though all the Malaysian cafes are booked out, I pick the busiest looking restaurant with space. When ordering, I ask for a surprise, though really, I mean a blue plate of duck rice. 40 minutes later, a circular platter emerges with ice, yellow flowers, and flanks of salmon. In the middle is a pool of rose petals, white at the base, blushing towards the tip. Clam, the waitress declares, my favorite. Gummy and tasteless in my mouth, I swallow and smile at her dutifully. She is Chinese with a Glaswegian accent, and I wonder if she too is surprised when I speak. She places a wad of cardboard underneath the table to steady it. And suddenly a part of me wants to hold her, bury my face in her hair, tell her I walked the whole of Tyneside for a pomelo. Recount that in the body electric, those parts most ruined will fizz like expired melon. That out here, the permission to locate a bleed is never signed. We do our own surgeries, our own hash jobs, gesticulating and cleaving in the dark. Look how good we're getting at shucking these bodies. Look at the clams that spill open from their filmy shells. We who are so lost, so out of love, choosing cruelty over language, stacking plates and collecting knives. And then to finish off, I'm gonna do the last poem of the pamphlet. I actually haven't done that in a reading before. And this is about a lot of things, but one of the main things it's about is the aquarium scene in Basil Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, where they're like perched behind the blue glass. And that's particularly in my mind because I saw the Almeida Theatre's production of Romeo and Juliet on the weekend, and it was incredible. And there were so many gorgeous candles outlined against the wall. And I instantly thought of the aquarium scene as well. Water. I swim in you once in Greece, in green summer algae, where underneath everything looks to be strung up. I dreamed all of this. Dreamed we hung our ears up in the Aegean Sea like a series of wet postcards. I know little about encyclopedias, least of all how to spell them, but I know we opened one underwater, the category splitting open like the ribs of an angel. I'll rent a bassinet for Bible paper. I'll hanker for a better bestiary, but my body has changed. My handwriting is looser, leaves more space for the innumerable parts that don't join up like they used to. Like larvae carried about the room to breathe. I see the dip, dip, dip of a fish as it abides the lifelines of a circular body. And how the water makes us like children's drawings. Laza, so we are slow and fabulous. So we take too much time to be dedicated fingers. But we definitely have souls. Each piece like an octopus's sucker, a blue tea light plastered over a sheet. The whole batch as blue as telling someone you love them in an aquarium, as the fish come up to the glass and blow crenellated kisses. The Y is beautiful as a candied cherry stem, leaping off the dock into symmetry as it absolves, worrying you for a second as it leans back. And thank you very much. And I will pass you on to the wonderful Tom Branfoot, who I'm very excited to hear read once again.
Thank you, Chloe. Yeah, it's like a sort of beautiful dream listening to those poems, I think. I feel like there's a kind of a slowing down and looking at everything and really absorbing those kind of slightly uncanny details at times when I'm listening to Chloe's poetry. Our next poet of the evening is Tom Branfoot. But before that, I must remind you that after Tom has read, there is a Q&A. So if you have a question for the poets, get it in now, get it in the chat box, because we're going to need it very soon. This Is Not an Epiphany by Tom Branfoot examines inner and outer landscapes that have become inhospitable, where people are burnt by business as usual. People and creatures are burnt by business as usual. This collection is attentive to shifting landscapes where warehouses spring up on empty land and the incremental austerities that constitute our living. Its lyric absorbs the shocks and crises of survival within them. Tom is the writer in residence at Manchester Cathedral and a recipient of the New Poets Prize 2022. He organises the poetry reading series More Song in Bradford, which is gaining traction. I feel like I see amazing things happening at that night all the time. So maybe you have a question for Tom about that in the future. Anyway, he's going to read first. Welcome to Tom.
Thank you very much, Suzannah. And thank you to Chloe and Beth and Serena. It's been lovely doing readings with all of you over the past few months. So when I was deciding what to read earlier, also just a side note, I've had blood tests done today and I've done a funding application. So there are two forms of bloodletting. So hopefully I don't give too anemic a performance. So when I was deciding what to read, I'm back at home in Bradford at the minute, having lived away for a while. So I thought I'd read the poems that speak to the landscape, the very uncanny post-industrial, semi-rural landscape. So I'm going to start off with this untitled poem, which kicks off the book. Near the motorway turn-off's midriff of noise, cheek by jowl with a graveyard, they're planning to build a warehouse in the floodplains. 23 meters tall, 317 meters long, 178 meters wide. At night, the graveyard is dark. Silence heaps at the stone perimeter where the world crouches under trees scabbed with oak moss. I am setting you this very real scene. Sodium streetlights not yet replaced by LEDs, the raised grain fields skewered with markers. What is left to soak up rainfall, to soak up nightfall? In a taxi back home from the city, I tell the driver there is not enough money here, and it is almost so beautiful. I love winter and trying to get through each day to see the sunrise during my pre-dawn piss. I think we're always trying to do the same thing, feeling safe or to perfect. The driver orders a chicken burger to collect after drop-off, and the say no to Amazon banners are wet with glare. Thank you. As people have expressed, it's quite weird just reading to a black screen. So I'm gonna replicate the same thing I saw Jarvis Cocker do at the weekend, although he was having a dig at ABBA. So I'm real and you're real. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, this poem's called Lodgings. If you knew it would happen, then why did you let it? On my Todd, meaning death, meaning ivy, meaning own, rows of poplars in a lawned golf course do nothing. The hedge fund managers do nothing. Knowing property is the square root of rain. If you knew entropy, would you reproduce? Or that the green on maps wasn't accessible, would you even move? I am a car park crowded with car-sized aches, an old elevator with raw iron doors creaking with the weight of my civil disobedience, bladder like a cloud. Fuck this, I want a house in the country, pebble dashed with stars. So a lot of the poems are about occupying space and the different kind of spaces we occupy in precarious capitalism, I guess. And I've been trying to find a language and a form for precarity, which involves looking at histories of working class forms and song and politics, and also about the like local histories. And a lot of the book was written in London as well when I was studying there at a university, one of them. And yeah, I was really I really came to blows with like the rental crisis full on. And yeah, anyway, that's a bit of a side note. For the rest of the poems, I'm not really reading them. This one's the title poem, so this is not an epiphany, and this is it's written in what I call half sonnets, so they're 7-line stanzas, kind of unmetrical, but it's good to think through form, I think. This is not an epiphany, and it has an epigraph from Judith Butler. Let's face it, we're undone by each other. And if we're not, we're missing something. One does not always stay intact. From its yolky sheen and song, I spotted a gold crest in shrubland across from the Calderdale Way. An afternoon spent catching tears on my touchscreen, perched on a dry stone wall, heat chisels embarrassment as the goat bleached humiliation. It began in November as you flew south. I'm taking it like a man. 2 girls are TikTok dancing under the shelter of a blossom tree, decorated with just a few cherried boughs, enough to flash in the late sun, swaying outside the Heart and Lung Research Centre. You hope they're only waiting for the bus home and not convulsing, languageless, anticipating someone's results. There's a running joke that a regular at the church in Upper Mill, who always sat stumped on a corner stool for a sweeping view of the valley. And when they built a private cemetery lower in the Green Dale, he reserved a lot there, saying it's the closest place he could get to the end of the Stout Stain Bar. Taking out the recycling, a pair of grey lights flew southwesterly, honking in the crisp blue morning, tasered by an absentee, defecting sertrally just to trial another capitalist palliative, waking 3 a.m. every night until something stabilizes, magpies root on the empty football field. Steve was my driving instructor when I was 17. He said, "Intrusive thoughts are like leaves floating downstream. You don't have to pick them out." He was a recovering alcoholic and gambling addict who found God trembling. He showed me videos of the church choir parked roadside during my frequent panic attacks. This is not as simple as you might think. Recovering on an ailing earth, I've got too much love left over. It won't all stay in my body. Imagine a man, unstable as an atom falling apart like radioactive decay. It began in November. Such loose contours, all my layers couldn't hold. I was not multitudes, just something like water. I changed course, turning into the gardens of Odsal Hall, coaxed by tulip planters and gleaming brickwork. The air was warm and still around the fragrant Tudor knot until the groundskeeper appeared from behind an ornamental fir and spoke to me about human progress, the lengths a nation will go to. Back at the caravan park in Ripley, maybe just you and me, Dad. When I was 8 or 9, there was a girl, chiffon, black hair, blue eyes. Up by the lake, we fed bread to the wildfowl until it burst into seasonal rain. When I ripped the bread bag and walked her home, wet plastic covering her dark hair. Cycling to Chorlton, through a cyclone of cherry blossom, In the golden early evening, my hands pruned from hours soaking in the bath. All day I've been writing about regional pride, which is to say about love flourishing over time. Last night I rode home by the full moon's light as everyone grew wilder and wild. Through the hot wind, a fox screams like a boy, knifed and knifed again in the humid night. I wake feeling tumbled from the machine, all felted and bleary, rousing with raw hunger, but not enough to beg. I beat my fists into my stomach because all I want is to be tender. Just know I wanted kindness above all things. When the sun cracked like an egg on the pavement, blowing cobwebs from my limbs, I flew down the ship canal, disoriented by downy gosling, kneeling to touch speared water hawthorn. I don't expect you to believe me, but a dove flew out from the swing bridge, and a man with my name spoke softly to me. Forgive me, this is not an epiphany. Memories are luminous, detached things, embers after everybody leaves. I could listen to you talk until the stars lie down like a field in lambing season. Say my name, because after all, I am not God's favorite. Why can't we carry on pretending, at least just until morning, slipping between each other like silt through water, our mouths open. Thank you. I'm gonna have some water. I imagine right now everyone's clapping. I would. Yeah, jokes aside. I've got anything to say. Kind of wrote a script out in front of me, but I've got doctor's handwriting, so I can never read what I've said. Anyway, I'm going to finish off with one poem before we go into the Q&A. So this poem's called Return Thursday 14th. Slant cities pass in a sentence. I am fed up with all this reaching for an approximation of beauty. Was it not the brutish hour? The lights knocked out like teeth. I am no one to speak. Now, in the darker half of the year, bleed me like a radiator at the station, because the world is big. Take these hands because the earth is bending to a point. Bleed me like a sacrifice outside. Light fades in a page. The demand for love, writes Barthes, and his autobiography suspended in white, sharp and tied to no subordinate clause. This is the stuff that lingers in the stubbed October night, and I still text in longing, as if anything that came out of language could make language tremble. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was fantastic. I feel like I get little, you're such a phrase maker that I get little sort of almost like little earworms of phrases whenever I hear you read your poems. So yeah, I'll have those buzzing around my head for a little bit. I would like to welcome back all four of the poets now, as if by magic. I hope, or well, not by magic, but technology. I mean, there's a fair amount of magic in poetry, right? You know, it's and we're going to have a short Q&A now. I'm going to kick off with a question of my own that you can all answer, and hopefully this will get the audience, you know, revved up with their with their questions. So my first question, and you can all answer this, I guess, is just, could you speak a bit about the process of writing the poems in the pamphlet? I think quite often there's a point where you go from just writing some poems to writing a work or writing a pamphlet. And maybe that was really early in the process, maybe that was some way down the line. And so what you felt you were responding to, and also how you approached the task of bringing the poems together, that kind of, that kind of collating or herding the poems into becoming something. Should we go for who? Does anyone really want to answer first? We could start with that. I think that's a no. Chloe, do you want to?
Sure. I guess with Encyclopaedia, it feels like a bit of a cop-out because the form is inherent in it, because it's borrowing a form that already exists. So it's borrowing the abecedarian format that an encyclopedia has. But I think what I wanted to do in the work was also strain against that idea of structural classification. So if you get the pamphlet, you can see that at the start there's an epigraph from Sarah Howe, from her first pamphlet, which was called A Certain Chinese Encyclopedia. And it speaks to the various kind of ludicrous categories that things could be placed in. And so a lot of this pamphlet is trying to operate outside of the confines of structure, or outside the confines of meaning or language. And it ends up reaching a place of speaklessness. That's not a word, but a place of where speech kind of is no longer apparent, which often encroaches, as you picked up on the dream state, where the boundaries and rules of worlds, or the established world, starts dissolving. So I feel like I haven't answered your question, but that's because I don't like structure or form. I don't know if anyone else can speak to that, to their maybe appreciation of form.
I mean, the thing I always think about dreams and poems, and I'm sure someone else has said this before me, but that they kind of have their own logic, right? You know, the logic of a dream is such weird things can happen in a dream, but because you're in it, they make sense, or they make a weird kind of sense. And I think poems have that same thing too, right? You know, once you're inside a poem, what happens, and then you leave the poem and you're in the real world again. Sorry, that was kind of a tangent, but I liked it. Tom, do you want to talk about your?
Yeah, so I guess a bit more concretely, the close response, which has set up a lot of things that I'm sure we can pull out. But so this is my second pamphlet, so I feel like I kind of work in batches, and then that it's kind of like the forms of which you're working in that period of time, the periodization is comes back in the forms, so that they kind of flow into each other a little bit, or they're trying to do the same thing. I think we're always trying to do the same thing, and I think there's something quite profound in that idea that you're always writing the same poem, but because language is so flawed and that we can never actually convey what we fully mean or intend to do, I think that we're always trying to write the same poem but in different forms or in different ways. So I guess I was writing back against the cost of living crisis, the rental crisis, and these interlinking crises, which are termed by Adam Tooze as a polycrisis. And then I started writing a book about the Bradford Boar, which has been published by Broken Sleep Books in October. So then like I just stopped writing this pamphlet and then had a lot of time to edit them. So it was kind of like start and finish, a bit cut and dry for me.
Yeah, so it happens for you much more like a project than a this is a poem, this is another poem, I wonder where this is going kind of feeling.
Yeah, but I enjoy that. I've always got to have a project on the go. Otherwise I get really restless and I'll try and stop oil.
I mean, you know, why not? Serena?
Yeah, for me, I think that I started actually conceiving of it as a longer collection or sequence of poems after writing After the Mushroom at the End of the World. But then when I looked back over the individual poems I'd written the year or two before, I realized there was this kind of through line that was coming out. So there actually had been poems that had published in like individual magazines or were unpublished. And when I actually wrote After the Mushroom at the End of the World, I realized, oh, actually these sort of fit together. And that was like the moment that I thought about collecting them. And I think in terms of the editing process, I really fought the instinct to just present them chronologically as they were written. But I thought it was, yeah, it took like some distance away from writing them to actually go back and say, oh, this one actually interacts more interestingly with something else next to it before, after, or whatever. But yeah, my initial sort of instinct was more, okay, just this is how I wrote them in this order. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting also to hear other people in workshop settings. I've been really blessed to have mentors and friends who will read work a lot, and to hear what resonates with them and what ordering they thought. I definitely took a lot of that feedback. And yeah, it's cool to see new readings that you didn't intend come out from, you know, workshop facilitation. And yeah, and someone can say something and you might not have even intended it. And you're like, yeah, actually, that really resonates with what, even if you didn't mean it. So I think that's a really beautiful part of sharing work and collaborating. And yeah.
I think that's really interesting, like almost like how the process is a bit wiser than we are sometimes, that like you write a poem and you think,
Totally.
oh, this thing, this is something I want to do. And then you, with that lens, you look back at your previous work and thought, oh yeah, actually I've been doing it already. So I think it's really, really interesting. Thank you. Beth?
I think I'm much less project minded than Tom, in that if I think of the poems as kind of, if whilst writing poems I sort of think this is going to be a thing where they all go together and it's a project, then I'm overwhelmed. So I feel like I'm more a poem at a time type person, and definitely what Serena was saying about seeing those connections after the fact really resonated with me. And so I feel like the themes that are kind of interweaving in my pamphlet are more like things that I was thinking about and interested in at the time of writing the poems in the pamphlet, rather than that I sort of set out to have those, to write a pamphlet with those themes. And I think sort of similar to some of what Serena was saying, I think I was more that I was kind of doing as I sort of started to think of his body of work, which I've done before with like previous entries to New Poets Prize and things like that, where you kind of print them all out and doing all of them, laying them all out on the floor, and you sort of feel like a conspiracy theorist with like a, you know, one of those walls with all the bits of strings and things. And it's also an interesting way of psychoanalyzing yourself, because it's like, oh, I didn't sort of set out to have like these poems with the kind of weirdness about time, or all of the like dead animal poems, but like, and some of the themes are kind of obvious things because they are things that were like happening in my life. Kind of there's poems about like losing my grandparents and kind of their dementia and things like that, and so those were sort of obvious themes that emerged just from like things that are happening in my life, and then other things sort of crept in just because I suppose there's things that I think about a lot, or at least was thinking about a lot at the time, and perhaps some of them being sort of consequence of being like at a period of transition, kind of in my like early to mid 20s, and moving from university into the real world and so on. And yeah, I think
University is not the real world.
I mean, I work for university now and I'm still like, it's not the real world. But yeah, I suppose more a process of like seeing those things emerge organically, which I find like interesting to see happen, because yeah, it sort of shows like things that I'm not even necessarily conscious of, like being things I'm particularly concerned with, but yeah, it's quite nice. And sorry, and just to say another thing in terms of the process of like putting it together and putting it into an order, Suzannah can attest to how annoying I was, because I kept setting myself really like rules that seemed really arbitrary if I tried to explain them to anyone else, where I was like, well, I can't have like a dead or ill person poem next to like a dead animal poem, and I can't have the rat poems too near each other, and I can't have like this one. And I was just doing an awful lot of this that potentially was very annoying to anyone listening to me talk about it, particularly Suzannah, who had to listen to me talk about it more. But I think that was also an interesting part of the process, and I think I think I had to let go of some of those hang-ups, but I did manage to find a configuration that worked with some of them.
I think we kept to your rules quite well, actually.
Yeah, considering the fact that they weren't very compatible rules.
It was quite difficult but we had a table full of post-it notes at the poetry business at one point. So
sort of confusing.
I don't even know what that was in the end. Because, but yeah, it's
I did various bits of like writing, doing little symbols at the top and for different themes and so on, which it's a process that I enjoyed, even if I felt like I didn't quite know what I was doing with it.
Yeah, I think you always learn something from a process like that, you know. You always find things that you weren't expecting, so
yeah, absolutely.
It was all to the good in the end. Okay, I don't think we have any questions from the audience, and I'm slightly conscious of time, so I'm going to ask you one more question. I've never asked this question before of new poets or any other group of poets, so I do hope this is I really hope this goes well. So you've all read together a few times now. Are there particular poems of each other's that you look forward to? Serena?
Yeah, I love Familial Scriptures by Beth, and that line at the end of, I don't know what the sacred is, but I hear it in her trembling voice. I just think it's such a simple but profound way of capturing kind of that interplay of like faith and doubt and the precarity of faith. And yeah, I think it's so beautiful. So I love it every time.
Yeah, it's a fantastic poem. It's the favorite. Yeah, thank you. Beth, you have been named, so you can pick someone else's.
Well, it's always really nice to hear people's work again, especially that we've kind of read in these few different contexts now, and also the way that it's kind of, I'm always interested to see like which ones people read each time, and like I know that I have like sort of little spiels that I do, and sometimes I do like slightly similar spiels, and I'm like, these guys all know that I'm doing it again. But I also like to kind of hear the different things that you guys say about your poems each time, which is, and now I'm rambling. But I really like the Tom's title poem, This Is Not an Epiphany. Like, I think I'm someone who can't write long poems, and I think there's something, the like sense of like place in that, and like the way that the images kind of interweave is so nice, and the way that it is like the units feel self-contained, but also they flow together nicely. That's something that I admire a lot. I don't know, should I say for other people as well? I was slightly disappointed Chloe didn't do a chopping off the end of her thumb poem, because I like that one a lot. But so people need to buy Chloe's book so they can read that. And I really like The Mushroom at the End of the World. That's Serena's one. I think like it's such an excellent title, obviously like taken from somewhere, but then like the way you use that premise is really cool as well. Really interesting.
It sent me on a quest for that book, actually, the Mushroom book. I finished a book on a train journey. I was like, right, this is an opportunity for me to go to the bookshop in the station and buy The Mushroom at the End of the World, and they didn't have it. So I still don't have it. I bought something else and had to read that. So yeah, great. Tom.
The Mushroom book is good. I think is it published by an American university press though. I'm not sure how easy it'd be to find,
Okay.
unless at quite a specific bookshop. I'll tell you what, I reckon La Biblioteca in Sheffield have it. It's
Yeah,
worth
he's
yeah.
good, isn't he?
He's
made
really
that.
me and my girlfriend spent way too much money there the other day before pub. But yeah, thank you, Beth, for saying that. I remember me and Beth were having a chat at Sheaf, talking about long poems, and I was saying that the form of that poem I took from James Acaster's repertoire on Netflix, because each like singular discrete episode kind of lends itself to the end one, and it's got this kind of circular motion, but each discrete episode also has its own like callbacks and references in between. So I was really trying to enact that in the poem. Whether that's successful is a different story, but yeah, I thought that'd be interesting to share. In terms of hearing people's poems as well, I can never remember titles when we're reading together. I feel like I can only remember titles when I'm reading the book. So the one of Beth's where the animals run back, which
Final
one?
Visit.
Pardon?
Final Visit, the like Harry Missionary mentioned one.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that because it kind of reverses itself as well, which I feel like hearing that being read is even more powerful. Chloe, I've heard read so many times recently, so I think we know each other's work quite well. But the whole of Red is the Body Electric is fantastic. And Serena, I really enjoy your satirical poem. I think there's a lot in there to admire, especially the line about she identifies as a married woman or something of that ilk is hilarious. Yeah, so I'll pass over now.
Yeah, I'm the same, Tom. I can't remember any names of the poems. I can't really remember the names of my own poems, let alone other people's. Oh, I love all of that. I love knowing the trends and the anecdotes that everyone's going to say, even as much as like I hate repeating mine because I know how banal it must sound, like the same skit over and over again. But I really love not only like the poems, but the kind of the little play that gets put on by Tom and Serena and Beth. I love Beth's baby. I don't know the names. I love Beth's baby poem, where it's a dream poem. So obviously I love it, but I love the kind of the confrontation between these two hypothetical selves and the like unsaid conversation that happens. It's just such a beautiful, elegant poem. And I also really love Shop Local. So it's so hilarious. Like, yeah, it's just got that really kind of concise, anecdotal, funny quality to it. I think really stands out in Serena's pamphlet, and it's so gorgeous. Tom's right, we know each other's stuff so well. Like if we don't know what to read, we'll just tell each other. We'll be like, oh, you do that one, you do that one. I love his this is an animal reveal, but I love his hedgehog poem. But I'm still in the skit where usually Tom's like, what animal is this? We'll do a little show and tell. You have to participate with the audience. And then his pre-dawn piss poem. Well, his pre-dawn piss stanza. Any of Tom's piss poems, there's at least 2, are excellent. And he always writes about a real kind of tenderness and looking for love that is just so senseless and gorgeous, and yeah, everything we all reach for.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that question again, because that was so lovely, listening to you all like say nice things about each other, and I've said nice things about you all as well, and I'm sure the online YouTube viewers are also saying lovely things. That is the impression I get. So I'm keen for us not to run over. I could talk about these poems all night, I think, but I'm not going to. So we are going to finish with a final poem from each of the poets in the order in which they first read. But just before that, to say, do buy these pamphlets, poetrybusiness.co.uk. The code is in the YouTube chat. Thank you to all of our poets, to Beth, Serena, Chloe and Tom. Thank you also to Pete Hebden from the Poetry Business, who is behind the scenes doing the YouTube, doing the Zoom flawlessly. And yeah, enjoy these closing poems from each of our poets.
I've just forgotten. Me first. I think it was going to be me first. Tell me if it's not presumably. So it's quite nice that Chloe hyped up the poem that I was intending to do last, and I think I hyped up the poem that Chloe was intending to do last, which is a nice little coincidence bit of I don't know, feeding into each other, I suppose. So yeah, I am going to do the baby poem, and the reason you probably couldn't remember the title is probably because the title doesn't appear to have a strong link to the poem, but it makes sense to me. So this is and it is based on a real dream that I had, and it's called I Often Dream of Ladders. Last night I emerged into a long room. 2 rows of cots lined the walls, a baby in each one. I somehow knew each baby would grow into someone from my life. Here, red-faced and wailing, was the boy I sat next to in Year 10 English. Sucking her thumb, the girl at whose house party I first tried beer. And waving his tiny fists, a university course mate who always had something to say in seminars. In every crib, another acquaintance who was born the same year as me. As I peered down at an infant who would one day be my flatmate, a deep urge seized hold of me. Not broodiness, but the need to find the baby who would become me. I walked the middle of the 2 rows, looking left then right at each pair of cots, as if carefully crossing a very wide road. I thought I'd recognise myself, as a mother recognises her child, but I searched without success. Even so, I could not rid myself of the longing to hold that tiny, wide-eyed creature, the part of me around which the rest grew. What else is the point of time travel, if not to cradle the smallest, softest versions of ourselves, if not to sing a lullaby, to try and soothe them when they cry? Thank you, and I'll pass over to Serena now.
Thanks, Beth. So for this last poem I'm going to read is the final poem in the pamphlet, and it's called Let's Catch Up Soon. You'd like to ventriloquize that leaf or the veins bulging inside it, cul-de-sac of the clementine wedge, bumpy with seeds, one more dead-end street. Pulp thick with fruit hair, tree blood, lavender honey, syrup boiled and tapped, one more sweet thing to extract. Waiting for fruits to soften is waiting for a friend with whom it's been a long time since you've spoken. You'd like to ventriloquize the rot, the fur, the bowl going bad, the brown parts of the peach, the mush of berries, apple skin wrinkling, pieces of flesh reconsumed by soil. It's true you speak for muck, but time is still mold. Hold your breath, deceptive cadence, it grows. And I'll pass along to Chloe.
Me and Beth did call each other's final poems. I think which shows how well we know each other. So we've been writing together for a long time. My last poem is about when I cut off the end of my thumb whilst creating an apology card, which is not a genre card unless you're me, and then it is a genre card. And it also speaks to Sylvia Plath's thumb poem, which is a lot of fun. Zephyr. Moon scallop in a pan. I scythe a thumb. Watch it squid and slip down the drain with a hair dye and goldfish. I'd fold a perfect circle, a dazzling pile for a perfect boy. Only meaning to cut a straight line for an apology, but slipping quick with a box cutter and a plastic ruler. Scalpel slipping off the paper like a suit of Dalmatian. Lying in hospital while something purple on my neck forms. Ruling out pianos and conscription and becoming an astronaut. I propose with the best part of myself wrapped in tissue. In the cold, sticking out like a sore welt. The albumin spilling out alongside the ladybirds. Everyone tries to climb back inside their body, but what is the point? I go oyster harvesting like the rest of you. Eat wet steak and press doorbells and peel eggs. I win every thumb war all the same. I can carry a gassy toast and jump off egg rock singing glorious, glorious extravagant, thinking this must be what love is like. Thinking fuck the stitches. I'm going to bellow from the rooftops and not care where my red heart lands. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And I will virtually hand you over to Tom, who will see us out in no doubt a gorgeous way.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to finish with this poem. I said I'd do local poems, and I've kind of got through all the, like, you know, when you get a radius on a map, I've kind of expanded to like 25 miles. So we're in Bakewell now, and poems aren't about one thing; they're about many things. But two constants in my life: public transport's a nightmare, and my shoes always break for some reason. And this poem kind of takes place in Bakewell, and I was wearing these shoes from the charity shop because I was walking in Sheffield, and my shoes like just exploded. I don't know, this doesn't happen to anyone else either. So I was wearing these like really uncomfortable shoes to walk around Bakewell all day. Anyway, owling. Owling. In the black soup of lampless country, you goggle the window for night birds, while I stare forward, searching for nothing in the mud and rain Rorschach, the fragile grit of a decommissioned child, my libido siphoned at the crossroads. Tomorrow there will be a solar storm. Disorienting animals and trains will be cancelled by an atmospheric wind. Unvoyaging on the hourly bus, seats occupied by diminutive hopes. We are running out of air in the archives of winter. There are no owls, only exhausted snowdrops. Maybe it's the brooding in my heartburn which attunes me to the earth, below the thin soles of these dead man's shoes. The gale in your breath, turbulent with dissatisfaction, uproots hairs on my neck. Your feral engine, turning over, practicing happiness. I want you in a small, miserable way. Thank you very much.